Greetings, my name is Ngobeni Casey, a young legal Pan-Africanist. I'm here to present my research proposal for a history module at University of Pretoria. The central topic of our group is colonial policies and their impact on African continent. So the main subtopic that I chose focuses on the upshoot of colonialism on African philosophy, as well as the quest for post-colonial Africa and intellectual outlook. The subtopic will allow me to construct concepts of Africa that were missed with the ideal of Africa we want as embodied in Agenda 2063. This research will attempt to intellectualize colonialism ongoing impact on Africans. From an intellectual standpoint, this research will aim to address problems and provide ways to abolish what the decolonial scholars have tried to write on. Moreover, my research question is that Africans today begin to raise the question about the true African philosophy as a result of decolonial struggle. The question today is not whether there is African philosophy, but rather, what is it and how does it appear? Then how can Africans undo the upshoot of mental colonization? How can Africans borrow a leaf from African Union Agenda 2063 in order to realize Africa we want? African philosophy emerges from a place of suppression. Everyone agree with that. For ages, Western Europe was convinced that Africa lacked philosophy. In other words, African philosophy was thought to be a contradictory thing. Where there was no philosophy, it was assumed there is Africa. Philosophers such as Hegel and others argued that idea that there was no philosophy in Africa, it is neither near nor there. Because history has told us time without numbers that their arguments are too mystical and they are directed by no evidence. So Professor Reginald Odoa from University of Nairobi in Kenya argued that until now, the people are failing to comprehend that the struggle against colonialism was not only political, but religious, economic, and also social to some extent, with the political struggle being the most well-known. Eurocentric philosophers like to argue that African cannot focus for a long period of time on intellectual concern, which they normally refers to as conventional conception of African mentality. And my research argues against this. Well, this research will take an intellectual approach. This approach is appropriate to my topic because it seeks to contextualize ideas as much as possible. The legacy of colonialism, for example, is a widely discussed topic. This study seeks to analyze and deconstruct these disputed historical views regarding the time change, particularly from an African philosophical point of view. This research, on the other hand, will validate the argument of major intellectual historians such as Thomas Kuhn and John Mbiti from Kenya, that the entire colonization process took place inside a single paradigm or a cycle. My research, to some extent, aims to dispel myths regarding the impacts and the repercussion of colonialism on the African philosophy. The history of African philosophy, according to this research, must be contextualized with the agenda of Pan-Africanism, decolonization, identity, black consciousness, just to mention few. To begin with, I think it is important that I first, by informing you that I use several sources in this research. Amongst others, there is primary and secondary. Scholars such as Kebelin stated unequivocally that the 1985 year was critical because it was a scramble for Africa. Africa was divided into different sections whereby they created borders and started to segregate them according to their geographical location. And there were contemporary scholars such as Steve Biko, Ngungingwa Thiongo, Rihanna Oliveze, Kwazi Werude, and Regina Odoe, and to others like Frantz Fanon, who critically and psychologically analyze how can we use this African philosophy to attend the problem of decolonization. So just to wrap up, I think the effect of colonization on Africa, way of life, and the need of mental decolonization is a critical issue that all of us must engage in. In essence, scholars like Frantz Fanon and Ngungingwa Thiongo argues that black people must transcend their psychological effect of colonization. And then to some extent, they must play a role in this quest for decolonization. As promised in the introduction, This presentation demonstrated that the practice of African philosophy is vital to overcome the mediocrity and occurrences that are undeniable in post-colonial Africa. This presentation managed to intellectualize colonialism's ongoing upshoot or effect on African way of life from an intellectual angle. This paper strives to challenge what most decolonial scholars allude to as neocolonialism, systematic colonialism, or so-called new colonization. Thank you.